You're watching Training Camp with Adam Marburger, exclusively on CBT News.
So you just broke down a lot of different structures, and the one it seems like you're the most excited for is the super CFC or the Reinsurance X or the Reinsurance Plus. I've been hearing a lot of buzzwords on this, and here's the thing too. I think when I'm about to say something, you tell me if I'm wrong.
Sure.
I think that there's no one size fits all solution. I think that every dealer is unique and everybody's needs and wants and desires are a little different. Am I hearing you right?
Yes. Can I add something to that?
Please do.
Okay. I feel like when I go to meet with a big dealer or any dealer, not just a big dealer, I don't make assumptions about what kind of a program they need. I don't go into it saying, I'm going to pitch a CFC or we're going to show them a Reinsurance X DOWC hybrid, or we're going to go in with a multi-CFC structure. What we do is we talk about the mousetrap. We talk about building a program that meets the dealer's needs. We feel better than anything else in the market. Can we customize their rates, their terms, their coverages? How fast can you fund the premium? Can you get it into their account weekly? What's the investment policy statement look like? Who do they want to have manage the money? Who do they trust with millions of dollars in premium? Don't just give it to the guy that you play golf with. I mean, if you want to do that, but my thinking is let's build out the best possible offering that meets the sweet spot in the dealership, mindful of costs and premiums and packs and what and add in the custom wraps and do everything, and maybe you private label something, and once you figured all that out, then you look at the premium flow, and then you look at ownership, and then you go to them and say, okay, there's a couple ways you could do this. Do you guys want to be? Let's say it's a brother and a sister, adult brother, adult sister. They own a Toyota dealership together. Do you want to have? You can fit it all into one company, just barely. So maybe you have one company, but maybe you have two, because maybe he wants to buy a lake house and she wants to stay invested, or she wants to be long in equities and he wants to have a lot of bonds. So is it a single CFC? Is it a multi-CFC? Does it make sense to consider a hybrid program? Is the juice of the what you think you're going to have in terms of tax advantages with NOLs of a Reinsurance X or a DOWC hybrid, does that outrun the having to change everything and look at possibly having an adverse tax consequence if you don't get the switch right in 8 years? My point is, we don't sell the structure, we propose options. We sell our mousetrap and we say, look, our mousetrap does this, and here's why we think our program makes great sense for a dealer. And then once they say, okay, I want you to help me do this, then we go, okay, let's figure out how you should own this premium. And so yes, I absolutely agree with you that one size doesn't fit all. And I think that we as professionals have a responsibility to really keep our focus on how do we serve the dealer and what's best for them, not to go in with a predetermined expectation of what vehicle we should put this dealer into.
Yeah. So you brought up the investment policy statement a minute ago. Are all admins created equal on their investment policy statements?
That's a great question. The answer is no.
And so do a lot of dealers even read or even know what their investment policy statement states? I'm asking that broad.
Yeah, generally no. So what we encounter now, if I wind the clock back to when I started marketing reinsurance in 2004, most dealers we talked to didn't have reinsurance. They thought they were being advised not to do it by their rep, by the manufacturer, by whoever. Oh, reinsurance it was being painted as risky and mysterious. It might be tax evasion. They'd say, oh, maybe you could get in trouble. Hopefully you don't get in trouble, Mr. Dealer. And we knew it was fine. We knew it was perfectly okay because the IRS went through a bunch of audits with companies in the early 2000s, including our company.
Mm-hmm.
And
they all passed.
And we spent, at the time, several years and several $1 million in obtained technical advice memorandums that said that the structure, the purpose, the operation, and the management of these reinsurance companies met the letter and the spirit of the tax law. And there was a no change on all the audits, and it was a total validation. And following that, Mr. Weil, our outside tax attorney, was able to have the ownership of a reinsurance company be removed from the list of listed transactions. Because up until that point, if you owned a reinsurance company, you had to check a little box that said you owned it, which was an invite to an audit. And that went away, so the entire industry benefited from that tax review. But to answer your question, nowadays, when I kind of fast forward, generally speaking, people have a program. And the dealers are busy, they're on they're with their team, they're with their charity, they're at their sporting event, they're back with their team running their dealership, and then they're off on a trip. If the money's rolling in, if they've made millions of dollars in reinsurance and they feel like they have a good relationship, it's an easy thing to just overlook. It's an easy thing to assume that you have the best, that they're all the same, that it's just a commodity, that it's just what's your fee, and they're not all the same. We know they're not all the same because when we look at an investment policy statement and we look at the difference between a funds held program or somebody with a 10% equity and really a cash equivalent, versus a truly invested strategy where you can have, 50% of your unearned premium on all your products except for GAAP invested from day one. And you look at what happens when you have any kind of independent fiduciary wealth manager run a model and go and take this asset allocation, put it up against that asset allocation, and go back 20 or 30 years and just see how those books perform. It's multiple points of difference. And when you compound that, it turns into a giant difference.
Wow.
Literally hundreds of dollars in investment income advantage between one program and another when you look at the investment policy statements and what happens over a 5 or 6 year contract. So it's a giant bucket of cash. It's worthy of a dealer's attention. The other thing I would say is the ability to access their cash and take loans from unearned premium and use that capital to build their businesses and grow their lives and do it in a tax-preferred manner. And these are legitimate transactions. I mean, we've been tested and it stands up. So if a dealer has a reinsurance company and the dealer wants to buy another store, or they want to do a facility upgrade, or they want to buy a piece of land or whatever, reinsurance company can loan the money to the dealership. We'll underwrite the loan so that it stands up as a commercially acceptable transaction. So it's going to be amortized, it's going to be collateralized, it's going to be a commercially acceptable rate of interest. So it's not going to be, anything kinky. It'll stand up under all scrutiny. And it needs to be performing. And so the dealer borrows the money, the reinsurance company makes an investment. They make an investment in the form of a loan to the entity, to the dealership or what have you. The dealership pays back principal and interest to the reinsurance company, just like they would if they borrowed it from the bank, because you make your payments, you meet your obligations. The dealership will write off the interest at whatever their applicable tax rate is. Typically, if it's an S corp, it's going to be the full tax rate deduction, just like they would if it was from a bank. And the reinsurance company collects the interest and pays 21% federal on it, which is part of the 831B requirements. And so they're able to access the cash without having to take the money out, pay taxes on it with the dividend, and then deploy that capital post-tax. They can use pre-tax dollars, and oftentimes the write-off they have at a dealership level might even be larger based on the effective tax rate than the tax bill they pay using their money. It's called an arbitrage. Yeah. So it's one of the best parts of reinsurance because the dealer can start to become their own bank, and we've seen dealers go from one store to multiple stores, do facility upgrades. We've seen them, and we've seen them improve their lives separately. I mean, lake houses and boat, all that kind of stuff.
Well, here I see. I mean, if a dealer does this long enough, I mean, some cases your warranty portfolio is worth more than your store. I mean, that's
in some cases,
Yeah, it's pretty wild. I mean, there's a lot of So I'd like to end this segment with a couple just tips for dealers out there. what products today should we not be reinsuring? What are you seeing as an industry running kind of hot that we might want to pay attention to? I'd like to talk about the old school lifetime programs that might be under reserved.
Sure.
Well, they are. There's a lot of programs that have been put out in the place where the reserves are off. What's that going to do, right? So I would like to kind of just, if we could piggyback on that a little bit, maybe give some advice to the dealer body on, things to look at in reinsurance right now. What products should we potentially not be reinsuring right now? What products should we be reinsuring that you're not seeing dealers reinsuring? If we could piggyback on that.
Sure, let's talk about that. I would stay away from glass. Glass has been really problematic and increasingly so the last few years. Severity on glass continues to increase, both because of the cost of the windshields themselves, as well as what's called ADAS calibration. Your windshield in a lot of these cars now is effectively a TV screen. And so, we used to be hundreds of dollars to replace a windshield. It's now thousands of dollars. So I would steer clear of reinsuring any kind of glass benefit that has replace. If you have it as part of a bundle and it's a repair and it's a reasonable aggregate limit, consider it. I would stay away from reinsuring gap unless your gap is firewalled and separated from the rest of your business. If you have a separate clip in place, it's in a separate trust account, and there's no right of offset between your gap position and your primary position, then I would say if the premium levels make sense, it's fine to reinsure gap. But you don't want to commingle it.
Okay.
Those would be the two main ones.
Okay.
I will say, as far as, the big bucket of cash when it comes to service reinsurance, the largest source of premium we all know is vehicle service contracts. And I want to say a word about that. We have seen more change in loss cost. Loss cost is defined by frequency multiplied by severity. So how much it costs to fix it and how often it happens, multiply those two, you get your loss cost. We have seen more change in both severity of claims and loss cost in the past 5 years than we saw in the previous 15.
Wow.
And that is not unique to us. We know that is industry-wide. So, you think back to COVID, and there was inventory shortages, there was chip shortages, there was a degradation with a lot of dealers because of inventory shortages. They rolled more vehicles that were higher mileage. They maybe pushed the envelope on retailed things that they would have wholesaled prior to that. And then you had inflation come along. And so everything in your world has gotten more expensive. Your pool guy and your lawn person and your dry cleaner, everything's gotten more expensive. Also, your labor rate in your service department and parts costs have escalated. And there's been part shortages, which means that sometimes instead of a used part, you end up with a new part where you would have normally done a LKQ. And so all of these things combined with an increase in complexity in the vehicles is pushing your loss ratios most likely higher and higher. So my cautionary general principle word of advice for everyone is pay particular attention to your last 12 and last 24 month loss ratios.
Okay.
Because if you look at a position that's been around for a long time, maybe it's only moved from a 50% a year ago to 52 now. You go, that's not that big of a deal. It's 2%. Yeah, but if it was 50% a year ago, and then the last 4 quarters was 95%, 95%, 95%, 92%, and now you're up 2 points. Well, yeah, but that previous profit, that's on the books. Your last 12 and your last 24 tells you where the book is headed. And so one of the things we talk about in our team all the time is you have to stay ahead of premium increases. And you don't want to, you can never become complacent there because past success is no guarantee of future success. So we have to continue to look at the metrics as they are. And I think it's a combination of proactive premium increases and then working with a risk team with actuaries and analysts to tell you where and why issues are coming from. So that's my general talk. That's my TED talk on
love it.
VSC. Beyond that, what we find is I fundamentally believe there's only so much room on the shelf. If you bring a dealer 25 products to put in F&I, they're not going to be more successful than if they have 6 or 7 probably because you can only focus on so many.
True.
So I see interesting things like we have a program with Permaseal, which is essentially a run flat program. I think that's an exciting possible preload. We see bundles like chemical with nitrofill and addendum stickers, those sort of bundles. There's different brake light products. You can reinsure the benefit, where if somebody has a failure, it'll pay the deductible on there if the brake light is unable to stop the collision from happening.
Okay.
So for me, the way I look at it is there's a core base of products that you want to build your offering around. So service contracts, gap, prepaid maintenance, really just for retention reasons. If you have lease, you're going to want lease wear and tear or a combo. And then I feel like it's everything else kind of goes into the plus category. Yeah. So, but we've got, for me, if a dealer loves this widget, well, I love helping them reinsure it. A lot of it has to do, from my perspective, with enthusiasm in the F&I office. I don't know if there's a one size that fits all there either.
Yeah, I love that. I could sit here with you and talk for 10 straight hours on reinsurance. That we don't have the time, unfortunately. Our time now has come to an end, but just promise me you'll come back. I'd like to have you on as a regular guest because there's a lot of changes in reinsurance. The reinsurance structures, I say this all the time to dealers, the reinsurance program that you got in 10 years ago is probably not the program you should be in today. Mm-hmm. You should be checking. And I've had situations before I run into admins are not, and this will be another session we'll do, where admins are not proactive on reserve increases. And I'm going to say this right now because I see it every day. Get with your admin dealers, get with your admins right now especially, and have conversations. When was your last reserve increase? How often are we looking at that? That is very, very important to be proactive and not reactive. That is your money, all right? So thank you so much. Thank you for coming into the studio. This was
pleasure.
a wonderful conversation. And thank you for joining another episode of Training Camp on CBT News. Remember, if nothing changes, nothing changes. You must be willing to take action in your store. And I want to say something real quick. I'm going to sound off with this. Fights are not won in the ring. Fights are not won in the cage. Fights are won in training camp. As professionals, we have to determine what is our training camp. Set up the non-negotiables. Let's get to work. And what we do in private will be known in public. Let's get to work, friends.
Thanks for watching Training Camp with Adam Marburger, exclusively on CBT News.